Good evening, y'all. Thanks for joining me. This evening, I'd like to discuss the concept of where there is no vision. I know to some of you that will sound like a familiar phrase. You know it from Proverbs 29:18, where it says, "Where there is no vision, the people perish." Now, of course, a lot of people might read that as the idea of actually being able to see, and of course you can understand how if you can't see it might lead to you perishing, you dying, or being destroyed. But also this I believe this passage refers more to the idea of where there's no vision of where to go, no purpose, no intent, no idea. So in army operational planning, we talked about strategic vision. Basically, the idea is that anytime you're going to plan an operation, which is what I did for the Army for a long time, you start with a strategic vision. In other words, what you want the battlefield to look like. And then you actually figure out what the battlefield really does look like. And then your plan is how to get from what it looks like to what you want it to look like. And that's how you start building a plan. Basically, you start with this is what the world really looks like. This is what I want it to look like. And then you go backwards from what you want it to look like. And you say, for it to look like this, we have to accomplish this. And before that, we have to accomplish this. And before that, we have to accomplish this. And before that, all the way back to where you really are now. And then once you figured out all the steps that you need to accomplish, then you start looking at what resources are needed, including time, money, people, capability, assets, all that sort of thing. And then once you figured all that out, then you can start movement. You can start trying to accomplish things. What you do is you break it down into these bite-sized pieces. Uh, Basically, strategy is the overarching idea of what you're trying to accomplish. Operations are the big plans for how to get there, and then you've got tactics, which is what you do each little step of the way, how you get to completing the operational. Hey, Rose, the operational intent, and then you're able to accomplish the strategic intent, which allows you to establish the strategic vision. So I realize that I'm trying to distill 15 years of Army training, education, and experience into a 1 hour discussion, but I think that the principles are pretty clear, pretty straightforward. The application can be rough sometimes, but the ideas are pretty straightforward, pretty simple to follow. So, what I'm saying is, we have to begin with a strategic vision because if we don't have a vision, we'll be pushed around, we'll be shoved in different directions, and ultimately we'll just be destroyed. And that's actually what's going on right now. And my analysis, my diagnosis of the problem that we have in the United States is that we have lost our vision. We don't understand the purpose for our country. We don't understand the purpose for our government. We don't understand why we're a people. We don't understand what we're supposed to be or what we're supposed to be accomplishing. And I know you've heard me say it 1,000 times. The words are right there in the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Hey there, Scott. All men are created equal. They're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power from the consent of the governed. So the idea here is that our strategic vision needs to include the components of a government that is founded and that functions to secure the natural rights of the individual citizens, a society where we are free, and we need to talk about what being free means, and also needs to include justice and security. Okay, so let's talk about those components and what it might take to actually make those things happen. And the reason that I'm bringing this up is because a few days ago I was having a talk with a friend who, hello there, Abadayo Farouk. Welcome. I was talking with a friend who was asking me why I keep doing the things that I'm doing, why I don't, just fall in line with the normal people who are running government. And I say, well, it's because I'm not interested in government as it exists. I'm interested in the U.S. government as it was founded and as it should function. And there are good reasons for that. So the strategic vision that we need to hold tightly to, we need to hold in our minds at all time whenever we're doing anything that involves politics, anything that involves statecraft is the term I prefer. In other words, how to manage the operations of the state. And please keep in mind that when the term state actually refers to well, you probably know that the Greeks had city-states. What that meant was each city was basically unto itself, a state. A state is a sovereign organization, a sovereign entity composed basically of a people and their government. So, of course, after the Treaty of Westphalia, you can look that up if you want to. Westphalia is Phalia. Anyway, it's one word, Westphalia. The Treaty of Westphalia ushered in the modern era of what we call nation states as opposed to city states. So city states were effectively tribal organizations where they built up their polis, their people, and then they built an organization to maintain order and to secure their city, their polis. And then over time, they started to be able to extend those. Now, the Greeks actually had, some of the Greek city-states had constitutions, and they were able to extend the reach, the influence of their constitution over larger areas through conquest, through influence, various other things. But after the Treaty of Westphalia, we went from the point of where we basically had these duchies, these little, counties that were run by individual strongmen. And what we did was we built nations. And of course, those nations continued to grow and take over. You could argue the ethics and the morals of all that. What I'm talking about is the fact that it happened. Okay. So we have these nation states. Well, one of the things that really is unique about the United States of America is that it was intentionally formed as a nation state from the beginning. And it was formed whole cloth. I mean, they basically just built it from the ground up, which is kind of amazing. That's one of the things that's really unique about the United States. But also what's unique about it is that in doing so, they had all the history, all the lessons of history to build on when they built it. And so they had Montesquieu, they had Locke, and come on, Marshall. Locke, and they had the ancient Greeks, of course, Aristotle, Plato. They had the Romans, they had Cicero, and they had a lot of wisdom throughout Western civilization to draw upon, and they were able to think and craft what sort of a nation they wanted. Most of the other nation states that came about over time, the way it happened was, there were people fighting over terrain, fighting over control of a people group. Somebody won and they established their control. And then, of course, our founders came from England. And in England, what had happened was the nobles held the king in check. And that's, that comes from the charter. And then, of course, that idea flows down through English history and comes over here. But the idea here is that they had a vision. They had a very peculiar vision, a very focused vision. And we've lost that vision. We really have. And the thing is that it's not just that we have lost sight of the vision. We've lost the concept that there ever was a vision. Our culture doesn't understand that there ever was a real vision. Don't get me wrong. There are Americans who get that. And there are Americans who study it intensely. And there are a lot of Americans who are very focused on reestablishing that vision. But frankly, as a culture, as a nation, as a country, we have really lost that concept. So when I say that I want to restore the republic, what I mean is I want to start from the beginning. I want to start from that strategic vision. And then I want to take all the lessons learned from the moment of its first proposal, the first proposal for that nation state, all the way up until today, the things that we've learned, because we have learned a lot since the founding fathers. And we've made some changes that I think are very important. And we've also made some changes that I think need to be flushed. But the thing is that we have to go back. We have to reach back to the beginnings and grasp a hold of this vision again and reestablish it. So you might wonder what makes me think that this particular vision is worth reestablishing, why we shouldn't just establish our own vision. And that's a really good question, frankly. As I said, we've learned a lot since the founding. And the next question you might have might be, well, heck, if we've learned a lot, we've progressed, right? Well, a lot of what we've learned has been very negative. And so what we really need to do is figure out how to take all the positives we've learned and integrate them all into the plan without giving away, without throwing away what was so important from the beginning. I'm very concerned that today's culture, we really have this idea, and I think that it comes from the infusion of the idea of evolution into everything. The concept that over time things become more complex, higher, more highly organized, and better in general, just over time because there's more time for some reason. I think is a very foolish way of looking at things. As a matter of fact, if you actually look at the way the world works, the opposite is true. Things generally tend to fall apart, right? Entropy. Things tend to break. They tend to rot. They tend to go sour. They don't tend to get better. For things to get better takes an infusion of energy, purpose, intent, vision. So I think you can grasp what I'm saying here. So what we have to do first is we have to establish our vision. We have to understand what our vision is. You might disagree with me. I sometimes disagree with myself. I wouldn't blame you if you did disagree with me, but I think it's important to actually take a look at these things. And I propose that, frankly, the nation state, the government founded under the U.S. Constitution by the founders of the United States of America, was effectively the most just, righteous, free, and secure society that had ever been created. Now, we have to be very, very clear about the fact that it was not perfectly just, it was not perfectly secure, it was not perfectly free. And certainly for some people, it was less so than for others. And we need to actually figure out what it is that we're talking about here. So when we say that a person is free, what that means is that outside impediments are not added to them. Okay, am I free to try out for the NBA? Well, sure. Does it make any sense? Are there internal impediments to my being in the NBA to playing in the NBA that have nothing to do with my external impediments? So an external impediment is you saying no, you can't do that, or the government saying no, you can't do that, or someone else trying to impose restrictions on me. I am free to decide that I want to try out for the NBA and actually make steps toward that. I won't get very far, guys. I'm 5'7". I'm built like a fire plug. I can't jump. I've got bad knees. I've got I busted my back up a few times, and I'm over 50 years old. So it's not real likely that I'll ever actually play in the NBA. So we have to keep all those things in mind. Being free doesn't mean you can do anything you want. What it means is no one else can tell you what to do or what not to do. I hope that makes sense. Now, of course, when we choose to live in a society, we choose to limit our behaviors to accommodate those around us so that we can live in a society. For instance, I live in development. It's not really a subdivision. It's kind of out in the woods, but there's a gentleman who regularly will walk down his driveway and wave at me and tell me I need to slow down because I drive a little quicker than he wants me to on the gravel road between our houses. Um, and he's probably right. He's probably right. And I actually like him. I like the guy. He's a good guy. He's smart. He's a good neighbor. I like having him around, and I don't want him mad at me. But sometimes I got to get places. So when he asked me to slow down, I generally will slow down and sometimes even apologize, and he'll kind of chuckle and send me on my way. But the thing is that if I were to absolutely insist upon my freedom, I'd basically ignore him, and I wouldn't be able to have a relationship with this gentleman because I would be abusing his rights to assert my own. When we choose to live in society, we choose to limit our own exercise of our rights. But that is freely done. It's a free choice, right? It's like a marriage. You choose to live in the same house together. You got to figure out how to get along. If each of you is constantly asserting your liberties, your freedom, your right to do whatever you want to do, and the thing is, you both have those rights. That marriage is not going to last. So I think we all kind of have an idea what we're talking about here, where the nation cannot last as long as all of us are constantly asserting our rights against each other. What we have to do is we have to have a vision that guides that. We have to have principles. We have to have operational principles that guide that process. So if we all understand that the vision is for all of us to be free. A while ago, I mentioned that, that our founding, the original version of our country was not perfect. We had slaves, guys. There were human beings held in chattel bondage. I mean, that's obviously is contrary to the founding principles of our nation. All men are created equal. They're endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Our government that was founded on those principles failed to achieve those principles because the men, we're all corrupt, all men are corrupt. The men who believed those principles failed to perfectly actuate those principles. We have to do better, obviously. Okay. So when we talk about refounding, restoring the republic, refounding our nation back on its original foundation, what I'm talking about is taking away all of the detritus of the failed operations of the past, taking away all of the superstructure that's been built, all the janky looking, little plywood shelters that have been built on the stone, on the marble edifice of our liberty. I hope that what I'm saying makes sense here, that you can kind of get this vision. So these guys built a foundation that is unshakable. All men are created equal. We're granted our rights by God. No one can take our rights from us. And anyone who infringes upon our rights without due recourse to natural law is committing a crime against us. Okay? So you get the idea. That is solid. That is beautiful. That will stand as long as nature stands. And the principles upon which it's built, the law upon which it's built, eternal law, will always stand. Okay, natural law will stand as long as nature does, and eternal law will always stand. And these principles come from eternal law via natural law. So those are unshakable. But then we end up with all these little things, all these weird little, patios and sunrooms and, whatever else made of plywood and cardboard that are kind of hanging off of the edifice of our liberty, of our constitutional founding. So in the beginning, we had this beautiful edifice, this beautiful nation that was founded upon these lasting principles that should have applied to all men, but we failed at the beginning to make them apply to all men, although we stated that that's what we believed. So we went through an operation to root out that that infection, that failure. That basically we ended chattel servitude of human beings and ensured that all human beings actually had the rights uh, that were secured to us by the Constitution. Ensured that the Constitution actually, the protections of the Constitution, were actually extended to all human beings, and tried to move on from there. So we have to, as we dismantle the trashy superstructure that's been built on this massive, magnificent edifice of our free, just, prosperous, and secure land, we have to make sure that we do not go so far as to deprive anyone of their natural rights. So I think if we can all agree that that's what we want, is for us to have a nation, a culture, a society where all men actually do live freely, then what we have to understand is that none of us have a right to impose our will on the others. I mean, if that's the strategic vision we're looking for, and it's absolutely the one I'm looking for, then we have to accept that other people will live differently than us. Some of them will live in ways that we really don't appreciate, ways that we really don't like. And you know what? You just got to learn to live with it. Now, I am talking about preferences. I'm talking about culture. I am not talking about committing crimes against people, such things as pedophilia. I'm not saying that we ever need to accept that. That is a crime against the child, obviously. What I'm talking about is if someone chooses a lifestyle. I mean, let's say homosexuality. Homosexuality and pedophilia differ in that when two adults, two people who have a right to live as they will, choose to live in a way that I don't like or that you don't like, it's none of our business. As the government, as friends, as neighbors, as pastor or whatever, who has the right, because it's been allowed by that human being, the right to speak into their life, to speak about their life. That's between the two of you. But we're talking about the government here. So the government's job is simply this: to secure that liberty, that justice, and those rights. So, I have some very definite ideas about how people should live, and I fail miserably to live up to my ideals. I certainly don't have any business trying to impose them on anyone else. And I have been the subject of other people's attempt to impose their ideas on me, and I don't like it. I don't expect anybody else to like it. So what we have to do is have this vision. We have to hold tight to this vision. And we have to judge everything by the principles and by that vision. Okay? So let's say that our legislature goes into session and they've got a bill before them that does some things we think are wonderful. Just wonderful, just lovely, wonderful things that should be done. The question is not, should this thing be done? It's, should this thing be done by the government? Does the government have the authority? Does it have the right? Not does it have the power, because frankly, the power of government is unlimited unless we actually hire people to work in the government who will uphold the Constitution, and unless we, the people, actually hold them accountable to uphold the Constitution. I love how people will tell me that the Constitution limits government, and I agree, that's the intent of it. But it doesn't do anything unless it's enforced. And we have reached a point in our society where it's just ignored. When I was younger, I used to pay a little bit of attention. I realized that if I listened to a politician talk, he would talk about how this proposal or this bill or whatever else was going to uphold people's constitutional rights. And they would talk around and around and around in circles, trying to explain, chasing their tails, trying to make you understand that this is really a constitutional issue. They don't even do that anymore. They don't care. They just ignore it. We're in a bad way, y'all. So the thing is that if the Constitution is not in force, and if it's not enforced, there is no limit. There is no limit to what the government can do to us. And let's be very clear about this. Government is just a bunch of people, and all men are corrupt. And as Lord Acton said, power tends to corrupt. Absolute power tends to corrupt absolutely. I disagree with his phraseology. I understand what he's saying, and I agree with it. I think that all men are corrupt, and power just allows us to enact our corruption. And absolute power, which means unlimited, or there's no supervision. Unlimited power, absolute power, tends to corrupt absolutely. Tends to allow you to enact absolute corruption. So all these things that people say will never happen in America, such as, I don't know, children being mutilated, children being taken from their parents and mutilated against their parents' will on order by a government bureaucrat. 10 years ago, I was saying that these things were coming. I'm not talking about me here. I'm just saying this was my experience, and people told me I was crazy. Today, I talk about how they'll confiscate your property, basically make you a vassal of the state until the point that your children or your grandchildren actually end up being farm animals. Their job is to work to serve the state. Their bodies are sacrifices that, Laura, it's happened throughout human history. This is just human history. People think that what's been going on in the United States since 1776 up until 50 years ago was actually the norm. That is such an aberration in human history. It's not even funny. So when I say that human history is catching up to us because we quit fighting against it, we quit fighting the barbarism, we quit fighting the lies and the darkness, and we surrendered to them, and we said, oh, well, we're good people. We're the Americans. We're strong. We're wise and good. The moment that we sat down and tried to rest on our laurels and say, we're the world's policemen, we're the good guys, instead of actually trying to be the good guys, we immediately began to decline rapidly. So when I tell you that if you, first of all, remove the supervision of the sovereign power of the land, which is you and me, the people. We, the people, are the sovereign rulers of this land. If we fail in our duty to supervise, and we supervise according to the standard, which is the Constitution, we fail to enforce the standard. Under the principles, if we fail to uphold the principles of liberty according to natural law, we're all created equal, and the government exists to secure those rights, right? We have certain unalienable rights. We, the people, are failing. And I'll tell you what, it's coming. I don't know if you can see these books right there. That is Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire by Gibbon. Those books right there, that set right there, I don't really actually read that set. They're over 100 years old. I still read Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, but in those books, those are sort of an antique that I like to keep so I can remember. But the thing is, we have lost the concept of what America is. We've lost our strategic vision. So what do we have to do? We, the people, have to inculcate that vision into our hearts. We have to remember what and who we are. We have to immerse ourselves in the understanding that all men are created equal. And we have to defend, as if it were our own, the liberty of every single other human being around us. Everyone. Every child who is killed by abortion has the right to life. And if we don't defend the right of that child to live, who's going to defend our right to live? Because if it's not defended, it doesn't exist. We have to defend that child's right to live. So what if the government is taking private property from someone and using it to help me, pay me a subsidy or give me whatever benefit from the government that I want? Is that a good thing? No, I have to fight to defend the private property rights of those citizens over there whom the government is using to fund my subsidy. I have to choose his rights over my desires, over the benefits that I get. Otherwise, I have no rights. My children have no rights. I hope this makes sense to y'all. So if we don't, I'm an educated, relatively educated Southern white male. I am the worst of the worst, right? So if I don't defend my Jewish or Black or Hispanic neighbors' rights to live as they want to live, if they're gay, if they, if I don't know, whatever else, whatever other discriminator there might be between us that I personally might find to be a problem. If I don't lay that aside and choose to defend that person's right to live as he or she will, there is no defense for my rights. None. So that's what we have to do. We have to get back to the point that you and I are defending each other's rights, defending each other's liberties, even when we disagree with each other, even when we don't like each other, even if you wish I would just go away, you've got to defend my rights, or you have none. There is no defense for your rights. Our rights are absolute, and they are unalienable, which means they can't be separated from us. But in the realm of government, when we're talking about using the government for its intended purpose to secure the rights of each person, at any point that we discriminate, at any point we say, well, this person doesn't count. This guy's so rich that it's okay to take his private property away from him. This guy's Black, so he doesn't have a right to live the way he wants to. That guy's gay, so he doesn't have a right to decide what to do with his life. That guy's a short Irish guy with a big round face who talks too loud. He needs to shut up. At the moment that we decide that limitation on anyone else's personal liberties is justified, we have just justified the absolute abolishment of any liberties at all. So liberties are the opportunity to freely exercise your natural rights. That's what liberties are. So at the point that we choose to not defend the liberty of any human being for any reason other than because they were depriving someone else of their natural rights, of their liberties, can't deprive someone of their rights, but of the free exercise of their rights, then there is no defense for our own liberties. All right, so that's the strategic vision. That has to be our vision. Otherwise, we will perish. We will perish as a nation. Our children will perish. They will perish in agony. Human history bears this out. This is the only opportunity we have. This is the only path. This is the only way this is going to work. What we have now is we have people vying over access to the levers of power in our government, so they can then use those levers to either rob people, even if it's not for themselves, they're still robbing people to give the resources that rightfully belong to other people, or to control people. One way or the other, it doesn't really make any difference. The point is that what we have now is this system where people honestly believe that government is about grabbing a hold of the levers of power that our system, that our elections are all about making sure the right guy has his hands on the levers of power so he can make those guys over there do what we want them to do. If you ascribe to this concept, that what this is really all about is us, our guys, our team, getting our hands on the levers of power so we can make that team over there who are the bad guys, they're evil, they're immoral, they're bad. We can make them act the way we want them to. The moment that you decide that's true, you have also surrendered any moral authority you have. The only people who have any moral authority to serve in our government, to have their hands anywhere near the levers of power, is those who understand the actual intent for those levers of power, the purpose for those levers of power. And the purpose for those levers of power is to secure the rights of each individual human being. Each individual human being. It's really that simple. Thank you, Ruth. That's very sweet of you. Let me see here. So Laura says she spoke with a teacher recently. Y'all, by the way, Laura McGinnis is running for delegate. She is running in a Republican primary against the current House Speaker, Roger Henshaw. And Henshaw needs to go home and, get himself a job. He doesn't need to be in the House delegates. Actually, Roger has a job. But he needs to, he's been in the House delegates for too long, and he thinks that he has the right to run our lives for us. So we need to make sure Laura replaces him as the delegate from, thank you, Laura, District 62, Calhoun, Clay, and Gilmer counties. So y'all help Laura out. Send her some money. Send her a note of encouragement. Tell your friends who live out that way to vote for her. Figure out how you can help her out, because we, the people, need her to win. So she says she spoke with a teacher recently, came here from Jamaica. He was right on target with the natural rights and constitutional mandates for our government. Wish he would start offering the same classes that immigrants have to take for citizenship in every school. I agree. Our students need to understand. When I was a kid, I took a civics class. My civics teacher was amazing. Actually, she's the one who kind of got me fascinated by all this. And unfortunately, I walked away from that class thinking that there were good, honest men who had had that same class and much better classes, who had gone to college and studied political science, which was just, from my perspective at the time, when I was much younger, was just a much better, more in-depth and broader civics class than the one that I had taken. These people were infinitely more prepared to run the government for my benefit than I was. And I was so wrong. I had met these people now face to face. I have tried to work with them on a daily basis, and they are not our betters. They're not superior to us intellectually, morally, ethically, culturally. They are not better than us. I know, Scott. They no longer teach civics or U.S. history, and we need to fix that. Hey, Dan, it's really good to see you. Guys, Dan's an old buddy of mine from before I became a delegate. He and I were engaged with the Convention of States project. I understand some of y'all probably are not big fans of that, but Dan and I, our intent was really good, and I think it's actually the specific Convention of States proposal under Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution that was proposed, is currently proposed by Citizens for Self-Government, I think is actually a very good proposal. The intent is to limit the power, scope, and reach of the federal government. Now, there are all kinds of concerns about it. I understand those. I agree with a lot of them. But frankly, we have a tool given to us by the founders to limit the federal government without trying to convince the federal government to limit itself, because the federal government's never going to limit its own power, scope, and reach. And I think that we don't have a right to not try it. It might go wrong, but everything else we're doing is going wrong. And this is sort of a super weapon that the founders left for us, and I think we should take it up and learn how to use it and put it to work. All right, what else? I said, where there's no vision, the people perish. We talked about what I think the vision should be. If any of y'all have different perspectives on what that vision should be, if you think I'm wrong, if you have something to add to it, please let me know. But understand that there's a difference between vision, which is just that picture of what you want it to look like when you're done, as opposed to the steps to get there. That's a completely different issue. well, not completely different. I mean, they're related, obviously, but when you start talking about, well, we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to get this guy fired and this guy elected, and we need to change this law and that law, all of those are tactical steps toward achieving the operation to establish that strategic vision. Again, I'm a military planner. This is deep in my head, and I cannot get this framework out of my head. But I realize that when I speak this way, sometimes it sounds like gibberish to people. But that's the way my brain works. It's the way it always worked. And I joined the Army, and then I got trained as an operational planner. Now my head is wired that way. So this is the vision that I propose. All men are created equal. They're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Included in the pursuit of happiness is the right to dispose of your private property as you will, rather than have it taken from you by the government and disposed of as they will. So people can talk about, well, we need to end this tax or end that tax. That's the principle that I will function under, that I do function under on a daily basis. That these rights are immutable, that they can't be changed, they can't be taken away, and they are, they're absolute. Now, our liberties are not absolute. Our liberties can be limited, because liberties are the opportunity to freely exercise those rights. The rights never change. We have them. They can't go away. But if we're not vigilant, if we don't work hard, if we don't keep an eye on these guys in Charleston and in DC and in our local communities who want to own us, whether it's your HOA or the school board or the local library board or whoever, it is inherent to the human condition that people want to control other people. And what we have to do is jealously fight for other people's liberties so that we can protect our own. So that's the vision, right? That's the vision. That's the country we want. That's the culture we want. That's the society we want. And yet we have to, from here, now that we know what our strategic vision is, we have to determine what the strategic goals are to actually make that happen. Well, I have a few I'd like to throw out. And I'm just presuming that we all kind of agree on the strategic vision, because I haven't seen anything in the comments here that negate that. But I understand that various people have different perspectives on it. But I think that's what makes the most sense, is that strategic vision. So what are the strategic goals that we have to accomplish to actually make that happen? Well, the strategic goals that the founders had to accomplish was, first of all, to get rid of foreign influence. We don't have a king. We are free people. So that was a strategic goal. Another strategic goal was to give the free people a vision, that strategic vision, to communicate that effectively to them. If you guys have ever read the Federalist Papers, the Anti-Federalist Papers, that's effectively what those documents are really all about. It's about various people, various very profound thinkers, highly educated people who were trying to, and not just educated idiots like we have today, but people who actually knew how to think, how to tear ideas apart, how to dig into them and figure out what they were made of and what their consequences would be. But so these people sat down and they figured out that they needed to communicate to the people the purpose of the Constitution, the intent there, and give them that strategic vision. And they did. And a lot of the ideas they had to deal with were that, frankly, our Constitution places some limitations on that strategic vision. But what we ultimately come up with is that none of us is perfect. And so what we really need is to dismantle the power of government. So we establish government, and then we dismantle its power and spread it out. Spread it out. So no individual and no group of individuals, no entity can collect so much power that it can impose its will on anyone else. That's the whole point of our government. That's why the Senate was elected by the state legislatures and the House was elected by the people. So that even at the federal level, the people and the states were separate entities with separate powers that they drew on to compel the federal government to do things. I mean, they really put a lot of thought into this, and we have absolutely dismantled it, especially in the 20th century. So strategic vision, strategic goals. So first of all, we have to ensure that we understand what's going on, and we have to separate foreign influence. Foreign doesn't necessarily mean coming from outside the United States, but it means coming from outside this set of ideas. So we have to get rid of foreign influence, right? Then we have to be able to effectively communicate this to our fellow citizens. This vision, we have to communicate this vision clearly and compellingly to them so that they can come alongside with us, come alongside us in establishing and maintaining this vision. So those are two of our primary strategic goals. The next strategic goal is to actually place people who believe these things, who are committed to these principles, into positions of authority and responsibility to reshape the government, to tear down those janky sun houses and whatever else, the garbage that's been built that's hanging off of the edifice of our nation. I hope you can kind of see the vision there. We've got this beautiful, beautiful classical edifice, and it catches the sun in just the right way, and it's open, and it's free, and everyone can go in and come out as they want and do business and speak with the people who actually every now and then get to touch the levers of power. And they're just these dark little alleyways that have been built down the corridors, and labyrinths, and barricades that have been put up, and it's just unbelievable. You've got free access to the levers of power because we actually loan the levers of power to these people we put in the Capitol so they can serve these principles and us in this strategic vision. And then they, of course, build labyrinths, they build defenses, they build bulwarks, they build tank traps around the levers of power so that only they have access to them. And the fact of the matter is, there are levers, they're ours, right? So we have to start hiring people who are actually going to do something about this. So my friend who was asking me why I don't go through the normal route, the answer is because when you go through the normal route, what ends up happening is, as you work your way through the labyrinths and through everything to get to the point where you actually have some influence, you actually can touch the levers of power every now and then, and you tell yourself, I have to do this, I have to jump through these hoops, I have to make obeisance to this guy, I have to kiss that guy's ring, I have to be this guy's buddy. And what you don't understand is the whole time you're selling your soul, you're destroying your own personal integrity, and you're turning traitor to your principles. And you have to. They set these things up intentionally to make you become a traitor to everything that you once held dear, so that you can then get to the point where you can touch the levers of power and maybe actually do something to affect those principles, to those things you hold dear, to defend those principles. And by the time you get there, you have become such a traitor against them that when you actually get to use the levers of power, you use them to destroy everything you loved before. It's what happens. It's intentional. They build this system that you have to crawl through and you have to maneuver through, so that when you finally get there, you have done so many things that destroy your soul, so many things that destroy your integrity, that you're one of them. It's just the way it works. So that's the answer to why I'm not trying to do it the normal way. For those of you who've never run for office, try to run for office with one of the major parties and see if you don't have some nice. You guys ever read Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan? If you haven't, you need to. But anyway, Pilgrim is this guy who's trying to get rid of his burden and trying to find liberty. And of course, what he's really doing is he's pursuing Jesus. And a worldly wise man comes alongside him and says, "You're such a callow young youth. You are such a, you're naive. You don't understand how things really work. Let me explain to you how things really work. I've been very successful in this world." And, fortunately for Pilgrim and for us as readers, he figures out that the guy's just full of it. It takes him a while and it costs him a lot, but he finally figures it out. That's exactly what's going on here. You've got some honest guy who's got some integrity. He wants to serve. He believes in what he's doing. He does what it takes to get to the point where he's got some influence. And in the process, worldly wise man has come alongside him and explained it all to him. I can't tell you how many times I was told in the Capitol when I worked there, your problem, Marshall, is you don't understand how things work. You don't understand how things work here. And I would respond every time, no, the problem is that things don't work the way they're supposed to. I understand how things work. I understand how things are supposed to work. The problem is that they're not the same thing. It's not that I don't understand. So what we have to do is we have to find people who understand how things are supposed to work. How do you identify a counterfeit bill? We've got Lizette Pierce here. She runs a business. If somebody comes in with a counterfeit bill, are you looking for all the different ways that a bill can be faked, or are you looking for a real bill, an authentic, genuine bill? You have to know what a real bill looks like. You have to know the truth. And then when you see something that's not the truth, you don't have to be able to identify what kind of a counterfeit is. You just recognize that it's not the real thing, right? It's really that simple. We have to become so inculcated with the truth that when somebody comes up and says, yeah, what you're really talking about is this, you can go, no, it's not. No, it's not. When they say, this is how you have to behave to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish, you can say, actually, that's counterproductive. When John Overington came up to me and said, hey, we'll get that bill passed that you care so much about if you will just vote for this tax increase. And I immediately asked him, what makes you think that you have the ability to get a bill passed? He said, we do it all the time. I said, what you have just admitted to me is that this entire process is stage managed, that there is no liberty, that the people have no voice, that we are not representing the people of our state, of our districts, that you and the other, quote, leaders here actually control the process so thoroughly, control the people so thoroughly that whatever you want to get passed gets passed, because you just assured me that you would get my pet legislation passed. And he said, I don't know why you have to put it that way. I said, I didn't put it that way. It is that way, and I'm simply describing it to you. So that's what we're talking about. So what's the answer? What's the strategic task that we here in West Virginia have to accomplish? Well, I think it's pretty obvious to you what I think it is. What we need is a chief executive who understands these things, will live out these principles, and will, lay down his life to actually live out these principles. And of course, a cynical person would say that I was a cynical person, and I'm just making up all of this argument to defend my decision to run for governor, when it's exactly the opposite. I tried really hard to convince myself that I shouldn't do this, that I didn't have to run for governor, that somebody else, some other good guy would do this. I can't find him. I can't find the other guy who will do this. I keep having good friends of mine tell me, well, we got this guy who's running for governor. He's not so bad. And I'll say, not so bad is not what we're looking for. What we need today, right now, is a chief executive of the state of West Virginia who will sacrifice all opportunities to be liked, to be part of the in crowd, to be, lionized by the political class, who will agree to every single day for at least 4 years to nothing but stand up against the current, against the wind, climb up the mountain carrying the banner of individual liberties, and fail nonstop for 4 years and never, ever, 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 ever stop. So I really didn't mean to turn this into a campaign rant, but we're talking through the process. So my strategic vision, and I hope it's one that we can all understand and appreciate, is to actually establish, my strategic intent is to establish that strategic vision, a place defined by geographic borders, defined by a certain culture, defined by a certain philosophy of government, which includes the concept that all men are created equal and that the government exists to ensure that the rights of each individual citizen are defended jealously by every single person in the government. I'm not stupid. Okay. I know that vision will never be perfectly actuated, just as our founding vision originally was never perfectly actuated. But you know what? If we do all we can to actuate that strategic vision here, like I said, bringing forward the concepts that we have learned over time, that all people means all people, even if they have a better tan than I do, even if they have different proclivities, ideas, ways of behaving than I do, that I don't agree with, maybe even especially if they do, that I have to jealously protect those rights, right? We bring all of that forward and we reestablish it here. Then West Virginia becomes the bastion of liberty, of security, of justice, of prosperity, that then becomes the model for the rest of the country. And will remind Americans all over our country who they were supposed to be. Because that memory still exists for us. It's still in our culture. It's just become a joke to too many. They look at all of the things that when I was a kid we considered sacred and good, and they turn them all into a joke, and then they say, well, they were always a joke because we didn't do it perfectly. Yeah, that idea that all men are free, written by a bunch of old white men who had slaves. Look, I get it. That's terribly hypocritical. It doesn't change the fact that the principle is good and right and beautiful, and that it belongs to all of us. Then what we have to do is we have to commit ourselves utterly to living out those principles, that ideal, that strategic vision, as truly as we can. Now, we're all corrupt. That doesn't excuse us. I'm not saying it's an excuse. I'm saying we have to accept the fact that we're going to fall down. We have to commit ourselves to that for the rest of our lives. Otherwise, there is no foundation for any of us to ever be free. All right, I have done way more talking than I expected to. Our hour's up, but let's open it up. What questions do you have? What comments? What Lizette, that's very kind of you. Praise God if it's true. I don't know. I've often wondered why God would make a thing like me. But anyway, here we are. So, does anybody else have anything to add? If not, I'm going to excuse myself. My wife just got home with my daughter, and it sounds like they're in the kitchen making dinner. I need to go help them. I didn't finish doing my housework. I was changing light bulbs and doing some other stuff, and I haven't completed that. So I need to get back to work. But I really appreciate y'all, and I look forward to any input, any questions, any thoughts. Because I tell you what, if you let this stuff percolate through your mind, it will raise some other issues, and you'll have flashes of brilliance, and you'll be able to come back and say, "Hey, Marshall, you missed this part," or "Hey, did you think about this?" So I really want to continue this discussion over time. And I appreciate y'all more than I can tell you. Have a good evening.